A quiet, unsettling truth. Some people lose themselves not in tragedy, not in violence, not in chaos, but in kindness. They dissolve quietly, politely, almost beautifully, and no one notices the disappearance until the truth, outline of their former self, starts to flicker like a dying light bulb in a crowded room. Being nice becomes their camouflage, their safety, their cage. It's strange how something praised by everyone, warmth, generosity, softness, can become a slow internal erosion, a kind of gentle self-betrayal. And what makes it so insidious is that it feels good at first. It feels noble. It feels right. Until one day, it doesn't. And by the time the truth arrives, it arrives like a whisper. Something is wrong, and it has been wrong for a very long time. Let me show you just one life, one moment, one human example. There was a woman named Elura, ordinary in the way that makes a person both invisible and irreplaceable. She was soft-spoken, with a tendency to tilt her head to the side whenever someone spoke, as though absorbing each word carefully, respectfully. People liked her. Actually, people depended on her. She was the friend who always drove across town at midnight because someone was sad, the coworker who covered extra shifts so others could go home early, the partner who apologized first, even when she wasn't wrong, the daughter who agreed with everything to keep the peace, the one who laughed at jokes that weren't funny, forgave things that still hurt her, and said it's okay even when it absolutely wasn't. She lived in a constant state of emotional housekeeping, tidying up other people's discomfort, smoothing out their feelings, placing their needs neatly where hers used to be. One day she is standing in her kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato soup for a friend who had stopped by unannounced to vent about a breakup. The friend is talking, pacing, crying loudly, while Alara adds basil and salt and pretends she isn't aching from exhaustion. Inside her chest, something feels like a thread being pulled too tight. Her friend complains about her ex, about how she always gives too much and never gets anything back, and Alara stirs the soup and nods, until the nodding feels like tiny earthquakes of resignation. When the friend leaves, the apartment falls completely silent, too silent. Alara stands there, wooden spoon still in hand, staring at the front door long after it closes. She doesn't cry, she doesn't sigh, she doesn't collapse dramatically. She simply realizes something so quietly painful that it almost knocks the air out of her. She is exhausted. Not physically, not from cooking, but from living a life where she is allowed to give and give and give and never take. It hits her in that stillness. She has built her identity around not being a burden, around being easy to love, around being endlessly, tirelessly, beautifully agreeable. But the cost is starting to show, and the price tag is her. That was the shift. It didn't come in flames or fury. It came in the middle of a kitchen, with a spoon in her hand, in the quiet aftermath of someone else's emotional storm. Her shift was this. She finally recognized that kindness can hollow you out if it's not paired with boundaries. Suddenly, the pattern of her life, years of accommodating, smoothing, absorbing, snapped into focus like a lens changing clarity. And what she saw was not beautiful. It was heartbreaking. But here is where the story takes a universal turn. Because Alara is not special. She is not rare. She is not an anomaly. She is everywhere. She is the man who never raises his voice because he is afraid of seeming difficult. She is the teenager who says sure, no problem, even when her chest tightens. She is the husband who overworks to avoid disappointing his family. She is the friend who picks up the pieces but quietly wonders why no one notices. She is breaking too. She is the employee who takes on extra work to prove she is grateful for the job. She is the person who cannot tolerate the idea of someone being unhappy with them, so they bend themselves into shapes that don't even look human anymore. This is more common than you think. People who are too nice often come from childhoods where being agreeable was safer than being honest, where saying yes meant peace and saying no meant conflict, where keeping quiet kept the household calm, where pleasing others kept love accessible. These people carry an emotional script written long before they were old enough to understand. it. And without realizing it, they reenact it every day. In friendships, in relationships, at work, in every corner of their lives. They become emotional sponges, not because they want to, but because they never learned how not to. And when society sees them, it doesn't see victims. It sees reliability. It sees stability. It sees sweetness. It sees generosity. No one asks how much it costs them. No one asks what they are suppressing. No one asks if they are tired. Everyone simply takes, because people who are too nice rarely refuse. Their suffering is invisible because it looks like helpfulness. Their wounds look like virtues. Their exhaustion looks like kindness. And their slow disappearance looks like maturity. Here is the dark truth, the psychological core that hurts because it is very often true. Being too nice is not generosity. It is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. It is the survival strategy of someone who learned, somewhere along the way, that love must be earned through sacrifice. It is the behavior of someone who fears conflict because conflict once meant danger. Of someone who fears rejection because rejection once meant loneliness. Of someone who fears disappointing others because disappointment once meant punishment or loss. Being too nice is a trauma response dressed up in pretty colors. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to admit that the people who give the most are often the most afraid. Afraid that if they stop giving, they will stop being loved. Afraid that if they set boundaries, they will be abandoned. Afraid that if they say no, the world will collapse. Because once, when they were small, it did. The irony is devastating. People who are too nice are often not kind to themselves at all. Their self-worth becomes intertwined with their usefulness. If they're not helping, not fixing, not soothing, not absorbing, not accommodating, they feel like nothing. So they keep performing kindness as though it is the only currency that buys them a place in the world. And the world, in its infinite appetite, never tells them to stop. Here is the real heartbreak. People who are too nice often attract people who take advantage, even unintentionally, not because the world is filled with villains, but because the world is filled with humans who take what is freely offered. The too nice person becomes the emotional anchor, the peacekeeper, the fixer, the caretaker, and eventually they become emotionally bankrupt. But even then, they can't stop. Because stopping feels like betrayal. Stopping feels like cruelty. Stopping feels like becoming someone unlovable. So they keep giving, even when their hands are empty, even when their heart is cracking, even when they feel like screaming inside. And the worst part? People rarely notice the danger until the too nice person disappears emotionally, until the light goes out behind their eyes, until they start withdrawing quietly, until they suddenly become distant, until they say something terrifying like, "I'm fine," with a smile that does not reach their eyes. Or until one day, they stop showing up entirely. This is the psychological tragedy of being too nice. You lose yourself in the service of keeping everyone else comfortable. You silence your needs until your voice becomes a stranger. You smile while your soul erodes. You shrink so others can stretch. You break so others can lean. All in the name of kindness. But kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-erasure. And now we come to the soft, fading end. The difficult philosophical whisper that lingers long after the words stop. Maybe the real danger of being too nice isn't that people will walk all over you. Maybe it's that you will willingly lie down so they don't have to step in mud. Maybe the true tragedy isn't the exhaustion, the resentment, or the quiet internal collapse. Maybe it's that one day you wake up and realize you've lived a life full of warmth, full of smiles, full of giving, yet you never really lived for yourself. You became a mosaic of other people's expectations, desires, and needs, a patchwork of compassion sewn together with threads of fear. The world praises you. The world applauds you. The world says, "We need more people like you." But they say it with their hands outstretched, not understanding that you are crumbling silently inside. So here is the final truth, spoken gently. You are allowed to be kind without disappearing. You are allowed to be generous without bleeding. You are allowed to love without losing yourself. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to rest without earning it. You are allowed to take up space in the world without apologizing. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of kindness you can offer the world is to start treating yourself as someone worthy of the same care you give to everyone else. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, softly, a slow returning to yourself, like a whisper, like a homecoming, like a truth you finally recognize as your own. Because the world doesn't need you to be nicer, it needs you to be whole. And you deserve a life where your kindness is a choice, not a debt, not a survival mechanism, not a cry for acceptance, just a quiet, unbroken, authentic expression of who you are, a kindness that includes you. And maybe that is where freedom finally begins.